Welcome back to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And today we are talking about New Morning. This is Bob Dylan's second album of the 1970s, but it is his first normal album of the 1970s because previously he put out Self-Portrait, a double album of mostly covers and live versions of old songs that people really didn't like. So this album was sort of Bob Dylan reestablishing himself, but it didn't quite work out in that way. When one thinks of classic Bob Dylan albums, one thinks of the early folk stuff, freewheeling Bob Dylan, the times are changing. And then when he went electric, he had pretty much everything he put out, counts as at least somewhat classic, bringing it all back home, Highway 61 Revisited, Blonde on Blonde, even the country Nashville skyline a bit. So he really had to push, and finally it seemed Self-Portrait got him a bit of place in obscurity. And as such, though New Morning is a lot closer in quality to the stuff before Self-Portrait than to Self-Portrait itself, it kind of flew under the radar. And my experience listening to this was basically this sounds good, but at the same time, the songs kind of lack the kind of magic. What I found is the vocals on this one are very similar to the vocals on his live bootleg album, The Rolling Thunder Review, which contains material from 5 or 6 years later. So it's very soulful singing. But as such, I feel like he didn't quite put as much effort into the lyrics. You'll have a relatively simple chorus, which he sings about in an intense way, but the lyrics themselves don't do as much legwork as they do on the previous albums. So let's talk about the tracks. This one opens with a song called If Not For You, which previously I thought was a George Harrison song where George Harrison imitates Bob Dylan, and George Harrison indeed recorded it for his All Things Must Pass album. But yeah, it was a Bob Dylan composition. And I guess the reason why I thought it was George Harrison imitating Bob Dylan is that it has a similar chord pattern and rhythm to Bob Dylan's earlier and better song, Love Minus Zero, No Limit. And not to take away from this song, it's beautiful. But again, when you're a master poet like Bob Dylan, this one is just, I'm grateful for my love, and uses fairly simple imagery, whereas Love Minus Zero, No Limit tries to be very precise in how it describes a relationship. I don't know if it's fair to call this one a knockoff. A lot of chord patterns repeat. Tom Petty, a fellow traveling Wilbury, would write a song with a similar sound to Bob Dylan's. I've certainly written similar sounding music. But yeah, that's kind of my mixed first reaction. It's a nice song, but it also kind of sounds familiar. Track 2 is actually my favorite track on this record, and it has the weird title, Day of the Locusts. The meaning on this one, it's not as mysterious as one would think. It seems to be very clear-cut that Bob Dylan was offered an honorary degree at Princeton, and he was paranoid about going. I guess just he'd become really uncomfortable with his celebrity at this point. But David Crosby, who's apparently mentioned in the song, really tried to persuade him to go. And at the time, there were cicadas buzzing in the background, one of the species of cicadas where they stay underground for most of their life and then come out at like a routine like every 15 years or something. So Bob Dylan, like a lot of people, confused cicadas for locusts. Now, when I hear locusts, I of course think of the biblical plague, and Bob Dylan lyrics are full of biblical references. So assuming that Bob Dylan kind of had that in mind when he wrote about locusts or locusts, it's kind of interesting that the locusts seem to be the one beautiful thing at this honorary degree event. He refers to them singing beautiful melodies. So there could be a lot of potential meanings here in this poetry about locusts and honorary degrees. So Bob Dylan could be saying, look, I'm an oddball. I know I'm supposed to be happy about this honorary degree, but that terrifies me. I just want to listen to bugs singing. It could also be that he intentionally mislabeled cicadas locusts as a way of saying, I was afraid of these events because these horrible biblical plague bugs were going to be there. But, they aren't really horrible. They're actually these harmless little cicadas, and they sang some sweet melodies instead. Track number 3 is called Time Passes Slowly. This one starts to solidify the theme of the record. It seems to be about escape to the country. The one thing that's maybe a bit weird about it is it's from the perspective of someone alone and looking for love. I kind of was under the impression that Bob Dylan's marriage was okay at this point. So maybe it's like he's reevaluating his relationship with fame and with releasing music. Track number 4 is called Went to See the Gypsy. This one seems to widely be interpreted as being about Elvis, though Bob Dylan has denied this, or at least he's said, I never went to meet Elvis. So at most it could be about a theoretical meeting. And so I guess what I would say for listening to this one is listen to it in the context of Locusts. We know that Bob Dylan is very caught up in insecurities about appearing in public, about being a public figure. Yet at the same time, he's sort of interested in the idea of meeting public figures that he admires, like Elvis, who he described as, American royalty. There's a line in the song that goes, "How are you?" he said to me. I said it back to him, as if Bob Dylan is saying, look, on the one hand, I can't get my own celebrity adulation out of my mind. On the other hand, I know I'm a celebrity, and that doesn't make me interesting at all. And my guess is actually meeting a celebrity, even though I'm supposed to appreciate it, and people tell me, don't go back, this is amazing, it's probably going to be kind of underwhelming. Track number 5 is called Winterlude. I guess it continues the folksy, outdoor, naturalistic aesthetic, kind of like the song Country Pie from Nashville Skyline. Track number 6, I don't know if I straightforwardly like it in the way, I like the most catchy Bob Dylan songs, but it's certainly interesting and cool. It's called If Dogs Run Free, and it's, I guess, kind of beat poety jazz because Bob Dylan is not really singing at all, but there's some jazzy melodic background singing. This one also continues the theme of rural escape, but it kind of makes it more abstract because obviously dogs are not, free running animals. Wolves are, I guess, but it's weird to sing about being free like the dogs when, dogs like us are also domesticated. Track 7 is the title track. This is another good one. It's called New Morning, and it solidifies the theme of the record. It's about feeling reborn on a farm. It uses animal imagery and continues with a rooster and a rabbit, and it just has a nice, catchy, soulful chorus of New Morning. Track number 8 is called One More Weekend. It seems to be about building up to being happy in a relationship after searching futilely for so long. This one is kind of the most mysterious on here. It has a lyric about Brighton girls being like the moon. I guess that means beautiful but unattainable. Why is he thinking about Brighton girls? I don't really know. Track number 9 is called The Man in Me. It's as if here he's saying that there's this sort of universal thing that males become, which is the man, a sort of strong, responsible, ordinary figure. Whereas Bob Dylan, the sort of public, edgy, pippy, is not the man. The man is something hidden in him. So as part of his rural escape, he's talking about finding the man in him who can be a strong, supportive partner. So after we have had several of these songs exploring the idea of finding a new identity, finding a new life in the country, we notice on this album Bob Dylan has a beard as if he's trying to cover up his identity, find a new self. We get to a song called Three Angels. This is a very lyric-y one. And now this seems to be Bob Dylan confronting the fact that maybe he really can't escape. Three angels at the table for me tonight. They know my face. They set a place, and it's for me tonight. Well, I can't disappoint them. I guess I'll join them. So, as much as he's convinced himself he's escaped, he's starting again. He can't disappoint the fans. He can't disappoint the critics. He's got to come back with something great. And Bob Dylan, you can take them or leave them. Well, they're sitting in this bar room, and I guess it beats the hell out of loneliness. Sweet loneliness, sweet loneliness. As if maybe the idea of this idyllic rural escape is not really happiness for him at all. He's just pretending it is, because what is happiness for him, being this public musical figure, is a confusing happiness. It's distressing and it's happiness. And then finally, we get a song called Father of the Night. This one is often interpreted as being about a prayer. I wouldn't have picked up on that because I don't have the biblical background. But when one reads it in that way, what's interesting is it never builds up to asking for anything. It only seems to exalt the Father or God's power. And in fairness, that might be what most prayers are actually about, the sort of praying as in begging for things that, us secular people most think about might be misrepresentative. But I guess by hearing this prayer where he's not asking anything, it's kind of this album ending with him surrendering to his fate. I spent most of it saying, I'm imagining this new life for me, this new morning where I start all over again and run free with the dogs and listen to the beautiful singing of the locust. But if God wants me to be Bob Dylan, then I'm going to be Bob Dylan. So, certainly some catchy moments on this record. It remains underrated, I suppose, because it simply can't top the fuller, livelier records that came earlier. But also, if you are trying to listen to more than just the basic Bob Dylan, absolutely check this one out. And I would absolutely like to see Day of the Locusts, and maybe even if Dogs Run Free, get a bit more loving. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.